Hi, everybody. We are live. It is day 3 of the Build the Perfect College List Challenge. And we hope you're still having fun because we're having fun.
Definitely.
So I see there's 10 people so far watching. We'll just give everybody a little bit of time to hop on. Please say hello and just give us a quick hi. I'm going to repeat this every time just because I want to give people the chance that if you haven't already given permission to StreamYard, and Mindy will put the link in the comments. It's a Facebook policy thing, and it just gives us the ability to see your name and see your face. Otherwise, it just shows up, which is okay. It just shows up as you're just like, oops, I don't know that. Sorry, Shelly. Hi. You just show up as Facebook user. So you're a little anonymous to us, which is fine if that's the way you want to be. But I just want to tell people, if you want the opportunity for us to get to know you, because we like that, then just give us permission so that we can see your name and your face. So great. Hi, Kate. Kate's saying, loving these classes. Thank you. Well worth $10. We think so, but I'm glad you think so. Okay. Well, okay. We got a good start of people. So day 3, this is non-academic factors. But before we get into that detail, we always like to kind of go back a little bit to the homework last night. And I know people started putting questions in the group, but we'd love to hear what you found. If anybody kind of took the time and they looked up their schools to see, or not their school, your students' schools to see were there particular admissions requirements, maybe there were different requirements related to majors. Please share. Please share, because we'd love to know that you did the research, but also maybe you found something that somebody else didn't find and they thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I thought there were a lot of nice, really good comments and banter back and forth of questions in the group, which is great. So obviously, this is stirring up a lot of conversation and a lot of thoughts about what to do and how to do it.
Okay, I'm just going to take 1 minute and share my screen to pull up the presentation, but really, please share any findings that you had while you were doing the research. I know there were a few questions about where to look on College Board. You don't have to sign into your student's account. I think my son would freak out if I did that. So College Board has a free section, public section called Big Future, and that's really the section where you can look up individual colleges, or you could do searches and you can get that data. So that's a great start. Okay.
Oh, all right. While you're doing that too, I'll address a couple of things. So I know relative to what we talked about yesterday, somebody in the group kind of asked if I would share again the definition of the reach match safety component. So I just thought I would just share that quickly. Is there's a lot of different ways to determine that, but the ballpark quick way that I usually advise my clients to do is whenever you find GPA numbers and/or ACT, SAT numbers, if your child is in the 75 percentile or greater, then I put that school in safety. Okay. If they're between 50% and 75% percentile, then I usually put them in target bucket. And if it's a 50 percentile or less, then I put them in the reach bucket for the most part. So that's the range that I use. Now, it's not, gospel, as I said, but that should at least, and it might be a little bit over conservative, by the way, but I always like to be a little bit more conservative on that end because of the subjectivity of the admission process.
Okay, we have a few good quick questions, so I think we can address them. So Eve's asking, is this SAT writing component the same thing? I'm assuming you said it's the same thing as the SAT essay.
I mean, it is. Honestly, we're not at the moment. So there's a couple of things. First off, is I'm not sure if this is one of the criteria you're looking at or researching, and maybe that's how it came up. I wouldn't be that concerned about that because the writing component of the SAT is actually optional for most schools, as opposed to the ACT where the writing is required. So I would look at the main section, which is the critical reading and the math sections when you're figuring out the percentiles, assuming that that's how you mean it. The writing is not a significant part of it, at least at this point. It used to be, then it wasn't, then it was again, and right now it's not again as far as a critical component from an admissions perspective.
So Angela has a great comment. She's saying, I realize we need to look for more of a variety of safety, reach, etc. Exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's why when we said that's the whole premise for this whole thing, right? The whole thing is building the perfect college list, because what you don't want to do, I mean, I'm sure you may have heard these horror stories of students, and I hear it, my kids talk to me all the time about things. Oh my gosh, our valedictorian didn't get into any of the schools she's applied to, and she's going to Rutgers. Now, nothing wrong with Rutgers, but as a valedictorian, I'm sure she could have gone to a ton of different schools if she didn't apply to just Ivy Leagues and sub-Ivies, So yeah, that's a great comment, and I'm glad that we got
that. Okay, Sandra's asking, every school I looked at shows that they had tutors, which is good, but what's the best way to find out whether these are drop-in, readily available free tutoring centers, or fee-for-service tutors? It's a good
question. I mean, the only way to really find that out is by calling the institution. That's the only way you're going to find out. And honestly, sometimes, it's free for a certain amount of services, and then you have to pay for extra. Sometimes it's actually free for honors students. Right. There's a whole bunch of different things that you unfortunately you'd have to make a phone call.
Okay, and there was one question we're just gonna talk about briefly about demonstrated interest.
Oh, right. Okay, so that too, and I see it. I see it, Stacy, your comment. So thank you. I mean, again, when I talk about these things, I'm talking in the most broad sense that applies to 95% of schools. I'm sure there's exceptions to certain things, right? So, and if I was working with you one-on-one, I obviously would know that and address that because we'd be talking about specific schools, right? But now we're talking about a mass. So I understand.
Ross, I say this, and this is a little bit of a joke, but when you hear admissions people talk, the word that I hear most often that they use is "it depends."
Exactly. No, it's true. And I just know that that in my experience, again, so because even with the ACT, if a student's going to take an ACT, when you sign up and register, they ask you, do you want to do the essay or not? For me, I tell all my students, when it comes to the ACT, you absolutely 100%, that's not an option. You have to take the essay. And the reason being is there are quite a few schools that I'm aware of that won't accept the composite score of the ACT unless you include the writing. So the last thing you want to do is have your student get a great composite score and not be able to submit the test to the college that they're entertaining. So that alone is a completely different topic that we're not even touching on, but it is one of the main factors of the process and putting your list together. As far as getting back to the demonstrated interest aspect, that also is something that we spend a ton of time on. So the short way I'll let you know is demonstrated interest is absolutely important at certain schools. It's not every school. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. Boston College, Duke, UNC Chapel Hill, UVA, University of Virginia. Did not care less if you come visit. Don't send us anything. We don't care if you follow us online. Just send us your stuff and we'll let you know if we want you. Okay? Then there's other schools that are very, very big on demonstrated interest. And the demonstrated interest could be in all kinds of different capacities. Following them on Instagram, interacting with people on the staff, signing up for their newsletter. So that's a really big thing, but it does depend on the school. But I will tell you one kind of quick way other than asking, one way that I teach my students to identify whether demonstrated interest is important is, again, going back to collegeboard.org. You put a specific college in the search bar. When it comes up, you click on the applying tab on the left-hand side. That first tab that comes out, it's going to give you all the things that are considered by that college. And by the things that they list there in the level of importance, that'll let you know whether or not demonstrated interest is most likely important.
Okay. And okay, just a few more really good questions. But I think what Russ kind of is pointing out is that some of these top questions that you're asking are great questions, but in a way, they're almost an hour discussion on their own. Really delve into demonstrated interest and how you show it and different places to look whether it's important is like a very detailed conversation. So, but we just want to kind of give you a taste of, what you need to start to understand related to that topic.
And by the way, that's kind of interesting, not a name there, but about Penn State. You're correct. Penn State apparently, which is interesting, they apparently just send us your stuff, as opposed to University of Pittsburgh, which is incredibly interested in demonstrated interest. So that's a big contrast, right in the same state.
So I'm showing this comment because I think it's a good insight. If the research that you've done over the past few days, like you've now kind of come to this conclusion, we will need merit scholarships to pay for any schools that our daughter is interested in. Wouldn't we apply to safeties then?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Forget the bumper sticker envy. Forget what people tell you about that school is not a great school, whatever. Yes, you would. The better match your student is to a school, assuming that they also do have merit, need, all those kind of things met well. Yes, that's what you would want to do for sure.
Okay, and last question, then we're going to go into the non-academic things to think about. So if your child knows their goals require grad school and they have a specific grad school in mind, should they try to get into the same undergraduate college?
No, no. And again, back in the day, when I went to school a while ago.
So long ago, wasn't it?
I know. Thank you, Dan. You didn't have to emphasize that. But anyway, yeah, that was the case. But nowadays, actually, and it actually could be considered a disadvantage, believe it or not, because a lot of these graduate programs, you don't want to give bias or first dibs or whatever you want to call it to the people that went to their undergraduate program, because then nobody else will apply. So a lot of times now, it's not an advantage at all to go to the undergraduate school and then try to attend the graduate school as well. So that is a question that I usually teach my students to ask if they think graduate school is something that they may come in, play before, when they go to accepted student days and all those kind of things. That's very, very key.
Okay. So,
Mindy, if I'm as young as I feel, that's not a good thing either. I don't know. I'm in trouble. Okay, so we're going to talk about some non-academic fit factors. So, look, I'm big on these. I think I mentioned this yesterday. Again, I'm going to emphasize reputation. And by the way, it looked like she was a biker too. I think she had a biker helmet on. That last question about the safety schools. Don't worry about reputation. Okay, I'm telling you. Again, in my experience doing this, it's about what the child makes of the experience wherever it is they go. There is this proximity is power kind of thing where, if any of you are Tony Robbins followers, he's very big on that. It talks about the fact that, being among people that can raise you to another level, it's contagious and you're more likely to raise your level yourself. I get that. I understand that. There's no guarantee going to a school that has a higher ranking or that, too many kids not understand how to evaluate a college. And therefore, they go by name, brand, reputation only, which, by the way, nobody knows. It's just self-stamped schools that, over the years has acquired, a good name. So definitely watch the ranking. Location and geography is a very big deal. Everything from how far away from home, but also, when I say geography, there's in-state versus out-of-state as far as just pure numbers, high percentage. So for those of you who are familiar with North Carolina by state schools require a minimum of 82% in-state. That's one of the reasons why state schools at Carolina are so incredibly hard to get into. It's not necessarily because they're the best schools in the country. It's because they have a very high in-state percentage by law that they need to abide by. That can make the cultural difference in the school, if your child is from out of state, very, very difficult. It's 13th, 14th, 15th grade for these kids. Gone to elementary school, middle school, high school, and now college together. They already have their cliques. They already have their friends. They know what fraternities and sororities they're going to rush. They have their, and now your child as an outsider needs to try to fit into that. Cultural differences are a very big deal as well. If you're a Southern person coming into the Northeast can be a little cold at times, a little bit. I don't mean weather.
Weather.
Exactly. I'm not weather too, but they can be very cold at times, a little standoffish when you have a little bit of a dialect difference, when you're speaking, accent, whatever you want to call it, and maybe that won't be very well received. Likewise, I've had clients in the Northeast go down south and experience the same kind of thing. So it's really important to understand the difference in culture and geography and make sure that you actually will fit in there. A lot of my students, especially in the Midwest and Northeast, want to go down south because of weather. And after I explain to them they're not going on a 4-year vacation, then we discuss the fact that, hey, by the way, you're going to stand out like a sore thumb down south, just so you know. You're not blonde hair, blue eyes, which is fine, but they're going to know you're not from there. And the second you open your mouth, we're also going to know you're not from there. So sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it could be difficult. Size, we kind of talked about that a little bit last time. There's so many kids that want to go to really big schools, the rah-rah schools and whatever, and I'm a big advocate for that, assuming that they can be their own best advocate once they get on campus. Because when you are in a class of 1,000 kids, to use the Penn State example again, and believe me, there are classes with 1,000 kids, that's a totally different ball game coming from a classroom with 23 kids in it. Living accommodations, find out if housing is guaranteed freshman year, sophomore year, and beyond. Virginia Tech, a school that I like very much, is having major housing difficulties right now. So they're not guaranteeing even for freshmen housing on campus. They're putting them up in hotels. They're putting them up all kinds of places. That could be a big deal. Social and cultural environmental stuff, including the Greek system, that's a big deal, but it also has to do with 2 steps down from there, the extracurricular activities.
Sorry, Russ, can I actually go back to the living accommodations?
Sure.
Another, besides, the school might be busting and putting kids into hotels or that type of stuff. The other thing I've seen is sometimes they take a room that's supposed to be a double and they make it a triple.
Oh, that happens.
I saw that on a few tours, school, and I was just blown away how they could squeeze 3 kids, and these were girls, and all their stuff into a room that was really meant for 2. It was craziness.
Actually, that happened to me my freshman year of college. It was supposed to be a suite double, and we had 3 kids in it. And I actually knew people that had 4, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a state school for you. But then also, again, the Greek system. So just as an example, does your child even want to be able to participate in a Greek system? Do they want that option? Also, in a lot of smaller schools, if you're not part of the Greek system, you actually a very difficult time having a social life at all, because there's not a whole lot of other activities and things going on. There's not really a big downtown. So Greek system could be major. Also, getting back to the cultural and geography aspect, is a lot of the Southern schools require you to rush freshman first semester.
Yeah.
That's hard to do when you don't even know what college is about. So Greek system is a big deal. Campus versus none, that's kind of obvious. Some people have a vision of what they think a college should look like. And a city campus versus a rural campus and the like. Extracurricular activities. I just had this conversation with a client today. Mom was a little concerned about her daughter wanting to continue to participate in her sport when she went to college. And I said, Mom, you should be happy that she wants to do this, because a lot of athletes are very structured and more productive when they're busy. And she goes from being very busy due to athletics and academics and all the things that she's doing, all of a sudden just having academics and all this free time, like we talked about a little bit yesterday, that's where self-regulation issues can happen. That's where temptation for the wrong thing can happen. Downtime is not necessarily a good thing. The other thing, with extracurricular activities, just because you apply and want to be involved in an extracurricular activity does not mean that you're automatically granted that opportunity. I'll give you an example. I have a student at Northwestern, and she applied as a freshman several clubs, 2 that were major related and 1 that was not. She was not accepted to any, because there they have a selection process. They don't just let anybody who shows up participate. It wasn't because she wasn't a nice girl. It wasn't because they didn't like her. It's because they had limited spots. And as a freshman, she was a low person on the totem pole. So she got very upset because these are 3 activities that she really got excited about. She wanted to participate in. And her first transition experience was no, no, no. Okay. Affiliations, excuse me, I was in my throat. Affiliations are also meaning religious affiliations. Some of you might be looking, if you're Jewish, might be looking for Hillels, making sure that there's a significant Jewish population. Other people might be looking for a Jesuit school. Like, there's a lot of different affiliations that you're either comfortable with or not. I will tell you, regardless if there's a huge Hillel or not, there are probably Jewish people at every school in the country, to some degree. I'll also tell you that if it's a Catholic or a Jesuit school, I will also tell you they're not looking to convert you if you're not, Catholic to that. Back in the day, it was a little bit more strict. There might be some class requirements. It's not as strong and intense as it used to be back when I went to school, which Mindy can make another comment if she likes. Okay, so why non-academic factors? Because I know I just said to you, you're not going on a 4-year vacation. That's what I tell my students all the time when they use the wrong criteria to drive their list, right? We talked about academic, and don't get me wrong, that's huge. That's incredibly, incredibly important, okay? But as we talked about throughout, we continue to say, happy child is a successful child. Transitions, you can go to the next one if you want, Deb. Transitions are not just about academics. Any of you as adults who have gone through a transition, large or small, job, relationship, place where you live, any of those kind of things, transitions are not easy for everybody. And you have to find your way. Finding your way, you want to find, so these are kids who just left. It's kind of a little bit cruel in a way. Just left their senior year of high school where they're finally the man and the woman, right? They're on top of the world. Everybody's, oh my gosh, she's a senior. He's a senior, right? And now you leave that whole thing, that place of power, to go to a college where you're a lowly freshman and nobody cares. You have to get used to being away from home. You got to get used to making sure that you're disciplined enough to go to class, do the work that you need to do. And you also need to make sure that you have somebody to hang out with, some friends.
And you got to do your laundry.
Well, that too. Yep, for sure. So the transition is really key. And that's why I think the whole non-academic factor is so important. There's pressure for them to find their social group, and too much pressure can lead to many temptations and sometimes trouble. So the other thing from your perspective, and I'm going to just say, I'm a parent, obviously, as Debbie and I have shared. I have a high school junior, and we had a very unfortunate event in our high school. I was sharing with Debbie yesterday, incredibly sad, but unfortunately part of a very unfortunate epidemic that's happening with our youth around this country. And at the end of the day, I want my daughter to be the strongest academically that she can possibly be, but I want her happy. And I want her happy to be successful. I also want her happy, and getting back to this whole college thing, college is expensive. As we talked about financial aid and all that. So you want, from a return on investment, you want to make sure your child is in the right environment so they can thrive, not be overwhelmed. So they can be ready and driven for success, not feel like they're a failure. So the return on investment is, so hopefully, again, as we discussed before about graduation rates, that they graduate in 4 years, not 6 or more. They don't have to hopefully transfer. At the end of the world, nobody ever comes to me and says, I can't wait to transfer. I'm sorry?
Transfer can cost you money. Because
big time.
The courses may not, transfer over, they may not get the same credit at the new college.
No, absolutely. Because what I was saying is that nobody comes to me and says, I want to go here and oh my gosh, I can't wait to transfer next year. Like that's not usually the goal, you know. It's not the end of the world, like I said, but like Debbie said, it could be more expensive. And it causes a child who's still in that development phase to say, oh my gosh, I couldn't cut it. Like I went from being a really good student here and I couldn't cut it there. Am I not smart as I thought? And they just start questioning everything. So being the right environment, as we keep talking about, academically, but also non-academically, is key to future success and happiness of the student. So as I discussed before, all transitions can be incredibly challenging. We know that as adults. Many omit these things because they're too set on things that they kind of think they know. Debbie said about the financial aspect, and I thought it was a great recommendation, and not enough people do this. I always, when I do financial aid consulting with my clients, I start with just the parents. And if there are any issues, challenges, or limitations, whatever, which most people have, I advise, just like what Debbie said. Now, what I would do is I would talk to my daughter or talk to my son and just say, hey, just so you know, you can apply wherever you want as long as it's within these parameters, whatever. But I just want you to know that money is a factor and it's going to matter. Same thing with these. Find out what your child feels about leaving home, about going to college. Are they excited? Do they feel ready? Have they heard stories? Like what? Give them scenarios and see what they think they would do and how they would react and how they would respond. Too many people emphasize the academic stuff, which is very important, completely omit the non-academic factors. Also, I think I mentioned this before, and I apologize if I'm repeating this, but every year for my seniors that I work with, in June, I try to do a college readiness free seminar for my clients. I have to tell you, it's very poorly attended every year. I try to do it in June before, because once July 4th, everybody's like, summer, right? So, and I don't blame them. So I try to do in June while they're still a little bit in school mode, to try to talk about how to prepare properly, how to self-advocate, and how to self-regulate, and all those kind of things. Nobody wants to talk about that. Everybody's they're so happy that the process is done and they made a decision and this is going to be exciting. And yes, I hope it is going to be exciting. You have to actually know that your child's going to be in the right place, and you got to do some of this prep work to make sure they're ready to go. First semester, especially, is the most challenging typically, and they have to go in prepared. The way you can try to minimize the risk there and the stress is to do this kind of homework and make sure it matches your students' desires, values, opinions, personality, all those kind of things. So, as we have said before, we got to do a little planning. So what we're going to do here, Deb, is one way, and we've talked about this with academic as well, you have to do comprehensive college visits. I cannot tell you how many people, when I ask them, so what did you think of the school? Didn't like it. Oh, okay. How come? Well, my tour guide, he was terrible. I'm like, okay, that's one kid out of 3,000, 30,000, whatever. What else didn't you like about the school? No, that was it. Like, did you do an info session? No. Now, these are not my existing clients. These are people that come to me before I start working with them, right? And go, wait, you just did a tour? Or, well, we just walked around campus and I didn't like it. There was nobody out. It was Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. We're all sleeping because they went out Friday night, right? So you can't do just a flyby, quick visit. You actually have to do comprehensive college visits, which is something I'm very big on. And that also is a topic that we spend tons and tons of time on, how to do visits the right way. It's from Jurassic Park, I think, right? That their tour didn't end up so well. Hopefully your tour won't go that way. Attend accepted student days. Now that's going to be after your student is actually accepted to a school. Also open houses. But also realize the open houses are a lot of times as your student is thinking about applying. Sometimes also have open houses specific to certain majors or certain disciplines, whether it be engineering or health sciences or business or whatever. Definitely feel free to attend those as well. the only caveat I'll give you when you do these things is don't just, because at these events, they roll out the red carpet for you and they really kind of try to do a hard sell for the most part. Listen to it all, because that's where all the bells and whistles are going to be included. But as I said, even yesterday, talk to as many students as possible to make sure that you vet out the information and you can actually validate that what they claim, meaning what the college claims, is actually being operationalized. Speak to students. I always tell my students, I'm like, you have to ask kids questions, right? And most of them be like, I'm sorry, what? Like, yeah, you need to ask students questions. And I tell them always, I say, listen, this is what's going to happen. If you don't ask questions, guess who's going to? And that's when they usually point at mom, right? Mom's with them. And believe me, I tell them that'll happen once. You'll be embarrassed, and then it'll never happen again. But the truth of the matter is, I have to talk, have questions on my visitation package that I give out to all my clients. I have a list of like 100 questions, and they don't ask them all of them, obviously, because then people would run from them. But they pick the ones that are important. They ask them real questions to try to get an understanding of what it's like, what the community is like. I tell people, if you go to an in-state school, talk to as many out-of-state students as possible if you're going to a public school, to understand how they actually were acclimated. Like, it's very important to talk to students. And by the way, I'll tell you a couple other things just quickly. One, if a student is not willing to talk to you, that can tell you that maybe the environment there is not a very social environment. Number two is, if they're happy, they'll be more than happy to talk your ear off. But guess what? If they're unhappy, they'll also be more than happy to talk your ear off. So both cases, you can really get a lot of information by talking to students.
So Russ, Kathy's asking, do you have one or two tried and true questions to ask?
Absolutely. So obviously, I'm not going to go through the 120 that I have, right? But I'll give you a couple that I always ask. One I used yesterday was, I'm just curious. Do you have an internship this summer?
Or you ask the student.
You ask the student, and the student might say,
what?
I'm sorry?
And then you could ask.
Right. And the follow-up is, that's great. Did you get it yourself, or did the college help you get that? Right. So that's one. Another question, which is not going to sound like rocket science, Kathy, but what do you do here on weekends? Do people go home? Right? If it's an in-state school, it's 82% in-state, and they have a girlfriend from high school that's going to a community college, maybe everybody goes home. There's not a lot of sports activity. Now, your child doesn't even need to be an athlete or into athletics, but I always talk about athletics because athletics keeps people on campus. They go to the games, they go to the pregame, they go to the postgame. So that keeps people on campus. Is it a transient campus where it's a ghost town and your child is 300 miles away? That's not an environment that they want. So those are a couple of questions.
Or another example relative to kind of what do you do on the weekends, depending if it's a city school. Sometimes a lot of the kids are not doing stuff related to the school, to the college. Right. They're off, enjoying the city, which for your student might be good, but it might also be harder, to meet friends because they're not interacting on campus. May also be expensive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, there's a ton of them, but those are great.
So one other quick question, Russ. What about prospect days for athletes?
All right. So I help students with athletic recruiting, and that is a totally different animal. I really like prospect days. However, I have a ton of caveats, which honestly I can't get into right now. So in theory, I like prospect days very much. However, I have a list of questions I take my clients through that I want them to ask before they commit, because it could be even, it's only $150, but it's $150 plus it's 3 hours there, 3 hours back, or maybe overnight plus dinner, whatever. Before you know it, you're spending $500 to $1,000 for prospect day. And then you're invited to a prospect day and you think that you're invited because the school is actually interested in you. But the reality is they're only looking at 2021s right now, and your child's a 2023. What you do is you just enabled the other kids to get seen, and you just fed their beach house fund for the summer. So prospect days are, I mean, it's a great question, but there's so much more to it that I would need to share and get into to let you know. They could be great opportunities, but they also could be a big money and time suck that you don't want to be involved in. Spend time on campus. I said that about that as well. Like I said, don't just do the information session and the tour. Go into the community center or the student center. Student center, the support services. Go into the cafeteria. Go into wherever you need. Go walk through. Up in a class if you can. Like, there's so many different things to do if you have time. Sometimes people say, okay, we put this thing together. We don't have a lot of time, so we're going to see this school at this time. We're going to see this school at that time, and this school at that time. Like, hold on, whoa, hold on. You can't see 3 schools in one day. Even have a hard time seeing 2 potentially. So if you can allocate the right amount of time, so that way you can really get a good feel for what, and not just the canned stuff that the college wants to make sure you see, but see everything. Walk around the perimeters and see, like, the back part of campus, is that safe as well? There's a lot of different things to do, and talking to students, which is going to require some extra time.
Yeah, I mean, even fitting 2 visits in one day, it's doable, but you're kind of
I think it's a lot.
Yeah,
I think it's a lot, and I think a lot of times then you're like, okay, well, and especially if your child really likes the school, cutting it short is really not what you want to do, in my opinion. Then you cut it short and then you leave. Well, I think I liked it, but if they really like it, you want to really, in my opinion, let them max out on the experience. So we can talk about homework. So on the, do we have the sheet?
Yep. Let me pull it up.
Thank you. So similar to what you did the past couple of days, what we're looking to do, and you're probably going to need to talk to your student about this as well. Also, I'm sure most of you know your child very, very well. You know their personality traits, you know their strengths and some of their challenges. So you can answer it on your own, some of these questions, and then you could actually go through with your child. So thank you, Debbie. So one of the things you want, these are just some examples of some different areas that you might want to look at. Geography, like we talked about, includes different region of the country, to how far from home, to weather, and to, like Debbie said, city activities in the city, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to read all these, but these are just things that we kind of touched on. A lot of times also, I want to just talk briefly about the alumni associations and connections. A lot of colleges will talk that up and act like that's, a no-brainer, and it happens, that every day. You really, again, similar to the internship question I gave before, you really need to ask about the alumni. Do the alumni come back? Do they set them up after graduation? Do they do counseling, volunteer kind of stuff, before graduation or in preparation for graduation? There's a lot of different things that you can ask there that, always sound good, but aren't always the reality. Debbie, if I could, I see one question about the best time to visit.
Yeah.
You definitely should visit. So I always tell people, other than money, the most valuable asset you have is time. And as poor Kobe Bryant found out, time was his most valuable asset, right? So to me, you have to see schools when you have time. It doesn't matter if it's in summer. Some supposed experts will say you can't see schools in the summer. I could not disagree more with that. There's a whole lot of reasons for that, but just please take my word for it. So best time to visit is absolutely before accepted, if possible. Those that make sense and that budgetarily and time-wise fit into your schedule. Definitely as many as you can before accepted, and then see it whenever it works for you. Hopefully when the school's in session. At the same time, even nowadays, kids go to school 12 months a year, not like when I went to school. There are athletes on campus over the summer. There are people that messed up and need to make up for it. people taking a very hard class that they can focus on just that class. There are people double majoring. There's a lot more kids on campus nowadays, even during the summer than there used to be.
Okay, Yvonne is asking,
Um,
would it be advisable to miss school for fly-in visits or open houses?
no, Miss High School, right? Yeah, I mean, I think, Yvonne, the answer is yes, provided that you've followed some of these things that we're asking you to do, right? You want to make sure that you're actually going to see schools that are realistic, and when I say realistic financially, academically, and non-academic stuff that we're talking about today might be a little bit better to actually validate when you're there. You want to make sure that it's potentially within your budget, and also that it's academically, you understand whether it's a reach, match, safety, and to what degree. Yes, I definitely think it's advisable. And most high schools give, sometimes you have to get something signed, but they usually give college visit days as well, depending on the age of your child.
So this Facebook user, sorry we don't know your name, is just commenting that when they visited during classes, that was helpful for their son.
Yeah, I do think it's harder to get a feel for school in the summer. I understand. However, what I'll counter that is, again, number one is the time aspect. Number two is location, size of the school, distance from home, layout of the campus. None of that's changing regardless of what time of year it is. The other thing is students who are going to class there are not in full enrollment time. So not all their friends. They have more time, usually interest, to talk to somebody like you who's a potential student there and a visitor. The other thing, that same thing applies to professors, deans, to admissions people. So I think I agree with you that it's better to get the good vibe there. And again, if you can't do it before they get accepted, you would do it after if it's a final contender on your list. So I definitely agree with you. At some point, if they make your final list, you do need to see it while it's in session. At the same time, I do think there's definite advantages to just fit it in as best you can with your personal schedule.
And then one other thing I wanted to mention is YouTube has become a great source in getting a feel for some of these non-academic factors, particularly seeing what the dorms look like, and you're going to get a different view of what the dorm looks like if a student puts it on YouTube versus if it's coming as from a picture of the college on their admissions website. So actually, YouTube can be your friend in this search.
Definitely can, and I think we're going to maybe potentially touch on that a little bit again tomorrow too, right?
Oh.
It's not really a data source, but it is a source. It is a source for information, though. Yep.
Right. And then the other little tidbit I always like to look at is the school newspaper. Just see sometimes there's contentious topics that are happening on the college, or to see what's advertising, just the tone of the newspaper. That's just an interesting thing to pick up, either while you're there, but also a lot of the schools now put their newspaper online.
Oh, they do. And that, getting back to that demonstrated interest question we talked about before, that is one way to show demonstrated interest. Sign up for their e-newsletter, and you will get a temperature of what's going on campus, activities, research, internships, all those kind of things. And Yvonne, you're very welcome.
Great. Well, any other questions for the non-academic factors?
This is a little bit sometimes, I mean, there are very tangible things, but it's also, and for the most part, the things we put here are the more tangible things that you could rate and rank. But what I would also suggest, and what I always tell people is, you want to try to, so just there we listed 6 different things. List them first in priority for you, your family, and your student. 1 through 6, rank them, 1 being the most important, 6 being the least important. Then for each individual school, go through the pros and cons in each one of those areas, and then try to lay it out and see which school comes out on top. And,
depending on your student, you might put in this type of a non-academic factor, which to some might be silly, but to others it actually might be very important. And that's the food. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, whose daughter is strict vegan, and they went to a school that they thought was gonna really cater to that type of, student, and they even called ahead of time and said, do your food serve, do the cafeteria serve vegan food? They got there, and yes, the cafeteria served vegan food, one dish.
Right.
And it was a great school, but her daughter just crossed it off the list. There was no way she was going there because she felt like she couldn't survive.
That's also, food is also, I mean, I don't think that's a silly thing at all. I mean, obviously, food's very important to me. I eat six meals a day. But regardless of that, I think also for kids who have allergies, any kind of food allergies, that's huge. Also, making sure there are options in different locations on campus as well. If you find out that your student one day needs to be at a distant part of campus, there's no food choices, either have to pack a lunch or whatever, that's a whole lot different than knowing that there's 3 food establishments right nearby that they can get something to eat. So I agree with you, Deb. Debbie's comment about food is very important as well.
Okay, so how about this is the last thing we'll do. Stacy's asking, I'll pull it up. Where on the College Board would you see about demonstrated interest?
Oh, okay.
Stop sharing, and then let me get a website.
While you do that, there's one other question about last night about the extracurriculars. So I'll just give a quick comment on that. So what I suggest, so what my whole, and I'm not sure your name, so I apologize, but my whole intention of talking about that is, as I said, on the Common Application, there's a list of, you can put up to 10 activities in the Common Application to submit the colleges that your child might be interested in or involved in. What I said is, obviously, every hour that they spend doing something non-academic is fine as long as your student is achieving the best academic standing that they possibly can, standardized test-wise and GPA. So as a result, when they have to make a decision and they have to be smart about the effort and time that they allot towards certain things or allocate towards certain things, I recommend for my students, the best student you can be plus 4 activities that they're hopefully involved in, or over time, they're consistent with, they increase their responsibility, maybe take on leadership responsibilities and those kind of things. Because then it shows real involvement and, meaty kind of participation versus just being in a club that meets once every, once every 3 months or something. So hopefully that helps that. So this is exactly what I was talking about, Debbie.
So I just pulled up random, just Boston University. And if you can see on the side here, they have these tabs: at a glance, deadlines, majors, campus life, applying, paying. I went into applying. And then the first tab is what's important.
Exactly. So can we right there. So rigor of secondary school record, that's your APs, that's 4 years of a language versus 3, that's doubling up in sciences, that's all those kind of things. Now we have academic GPA, alumni relation. Okay, now alumni relation could mean that, there's some kind of, or mother graduated from there, like that kind of like legacy type stuff, right? Yeah. Application essay, character, class rank, extracurriculars. Now we're not really seeing anything that would be demonstrated interest so far, are we?
Well,
level of applicants, interest. There we go.
That's it. Yep.
Right. So up until then, we weren't really getting anything, and they're very clearly saying level of applicants' interest. A lot of times they'll just say you visited campus, you had an interview. If they right there, see considered interview. Okay. A lot of times people ask us, does that school interview? Well, colleges change their policy on that all the time. This is a quick place to go to at least get an idea and understanding if maybe the school interviews and if it's important for
them. Okay. So that's day 3. I think we hit on a lot of interesting and important non-academic factors. Use your worksheet. Again, I will post it in the group as soon as we're done. You should have received an email with the attachment of day 3. And use this to start to do more research, like you have the past few nights, on either the same schools or a different set of schools. Use this to have a conversation with your student about what these non-academic factors might be, and start compiling a list and start researching the schools. And you're now, as you can see, like we're on day 3, you had financial factors, you had academic, non-academic. You could see how, first of all, you better get yourself a binder or get comfortable with Excel or some way to kind of start to store all this information. But, it's the start of pulling it together, and then you're going to eventually scratch some things off and add some things. And that's why it becomes iterative.
Absolutely. I think, again, these are three. I mean, there's so many other things, like somebody just asked about. There's interviews, there's essays, there's applications, there's admission strategy, there's how to do college visits the right way, there's standardized testing, there's so many things that we're not even touching upon, but we took what we thought were the 3 most significant and things that you can start right now do, regardless of whether you're a freshman, sophomore, or a junior, versus, the testing and some of the other stuff is more time sensitive.
And I actually want to give a shout out again, we did last night, to the people here who might have freshmen and sophomores. Besides educating yourself, which is, kudos and the fabulous thing to do early on, the information you're learning can really help to help your student mold what they want to do in high school.
Absolutely.
So now you kind of are getting like a peek a peek into what the future is, and now you can maybe guide them a little differently.
Well, I mean, also that's a huge thing, Deb, right? Because the other thing too is, a lot of times, like when people ask me when's the best time for us to start this process and start to work with you, Russ, and I say, okay, I'll tell you what I recommend, and then I'll tell you what most people do. What I recommend is, if you're thinking about athletics at all, between freshman and sophomore year, we should start having conversation, because the athletic process is a completely different animal. Like somebody asked about prospect days, whatever. It depends on sport. It depends on so many different things. So if athletics is involved, the summer between freshman and sophomore year, I personally try to stay away from working directly with freshmen, because it's a big transition year for them academically and socially. I find that a lot of kids are not really ready. Also think about college, like, oh my God, just started high school. How am I going to talk about college now? So, but I think, once you start sophomore year, that's when it starts. So athletes, I told you that. And then for non-athletes, for everybody else, I like to start January, this time of year, for sophomore year. And the reason being is what Debbie just said. If I work with a student and a family starting then, I know that I can have significant impact as to the class choices for junior year, perception of schools, getting some financial conversation going, and talking about all the things that we need to. So yes, Debbie, not just navigating the college part, but also navigating what's happening and what you need to do to be efficient time, effort, and money-wise throughout high school as well. Absolutely.
And, because the reality is, although, high school's 4 years, 9th through 12th, the years that are going to matter for the college admissions process are really 9th, 10th, and 11th grade.
Absolutely. And the huge emphasis by most is 11th. 11th grade is really, honestly, the key factor, because there are schools that will omit freshman year grades and they'll count your junior year's grades twice. There are schools that will, look at, first marking period of senior year and count that into your GPA as if it's a whole year. Like, colleges do all kinds of different stuff in their formula. So every year is important, but junior year by far is usually, and when I work with students who are already juniors, that's fine. But, I obviously can't help them. And sometimes, depending on what they did, they either overwhelmed themselves with the types of classes they took, or they didn't challenge themselves enough for the schools that they're thinking about wanting to apply to. And Stacy, I'm not sure where you are in this process. I promise you, you're still in good hands. If you have a junior, we've got you covered, because like the second part of what I was saying is that the first part I told you is what I suggest, but now we'll get into what most people do. And I don't understand it, but most people, they start the process now and even later of their junior year. People come to me May, June, July, August of their junior year. I still help them. I still get them through. So the fact that you're in January is a huge kudo. And believe me, you've got plenty of time if you take our advice and you follow what we're advising you to do. You'll be fine.
Okay. Well, end of day 3. Enjoy the conversations and the research. This is not, this can be fun. I think it's fun. And it helps to get to know your student better. And even as a parent, I think just going through these past few days and doing this research, you're developing, skills and a list of questions about how to approach colleges, because there's only going to be more and more questions down the line as you get closer to having to make a decision.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Stacy. The other thing I will say just on that, because you're absolutely right, Deb. I do this for a living, people. I've done this is my 16th season. And as I'm having these conversations with you here and with my clients, I still think about things like, wow, okay, I should probably talk to my daughter about that one.
Right.
Or I should have another conversation with her about, right? So, and I do this for a living. This is my bread and butter, right? So please don't feel like oh my gosh, I'm so behind. Like, even for us who we're involved in this thing 24/7, these are still great reminders and great things to get us to.
I learn things new all the time about the process.
Yeah, so I think well, that's why we love it, though, right?
Yes. Okay, everybody. Good night.
Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Tomorrow. Bye.